Nobu has recently moved from his native home in Hawaii to Jackson, Wyoming, where he is enrolled in an ESC class. References to mufflers, goulashes, and tabagons require that the teacher provide additional explanation for Nobu. The teacher's actions are an example of cultural sensitivity. Which of the following is not an appropriate accommodation for an ESC student with expressive language problems? Reading the student's writing aloud for him or her. Mr. McQuestion teaches a middle school class for students with varying exceptionalities that include primarily students who have an emotional or behavioral disability. Select the best activity for him to use during effective instruction. Playing a board game that teaches communication skills. Which of the following strategies reflects a student-directed approach for assignment completion? Allowing the student to set a schedule of reinforcement. Students in a teacher's class are loud and disruptive when walking from the classroom to the lunchroom. The teacher tells the students that if they walk in a straight line quiet for 5 consecutive days, they will have an ice cream party. All of the students agree to deal. Which of the following behavior management techniques is the teacher using? Group contingency. And recording the occurrences of target behaviors for use with a behavior intervention program, it is essential that each behavior be exactly defined in observable terms. This will enable the recorder to count the desired behavior accurately. A 7-year-old second grader has difficulty remaining on task for more than 5 or 10 minutes at a time. The student's teacher decides to reward the student every 10 minutes when the student remains on task. This is an example of fixed interval reinforcement. A student is having difficulty getting along with peers in the ESC class. The student frequently calls out in the class and often uses foul language. The student's teacher develops a plan with the student that allows rewards when the student's behavior is controlled and specific consequences when it is not. The teacher and the student meet to develop an agreement. The strategy is an example of contingency contracting. A middle school student has an emotional or behavioral disability as assigned a seat in art class near the whiteboard. As the student walks by the board, they often grab a dry erase marker and write on the board. Which of the following would be the best intervention plan? Teaching the student to respect property. A student is raising their hand and student B is talking out. Using peer modeling, the teacher reinforces student A's hand raising and ignores student B's talking. Student B then raises a hand and the teacher continues with the lesson. The teacher forgot which step of peer modeling. Praising the appropriate behavior once corrected. Reinforced behaviors are likely to recur, while behaviors which go unrewarded or corrected are likely to decrease. These are principles of operant conditioning. An ESC student with an emotional or behavior disability has been suspended for 8 days during the school year. The student has had a functional behavior assessment and has been following a behavior intervention plan focusing on aggressive verbal outbursts. The student has punched another student in the face. What would be the next step for a school administrator to take? Holding a manifestation determination meeting. The behavioral checklist generated by the general education classroom teacher who brought a student to the child safety team last year can be used by the ESC teacher to customize teaching strategies for the student. The checklist indicated that the student was off task more than they were on task. Which of the following might be a possible course of action? Establishing a behavior intervention program with a reward system. A teacher determines from observational data that student off-task behavior increases after lunch. Which course of action is most consistent with the model of positive behavior support? Adjusting the schedule after lunch to include activities that engage in student interests. A high school student is able to navigate the halls independently. Is frequently taught to class right after lunch. Which of the following is the best method to influence the student's behavior? Developing a contingency contract to reinforce being on time. A student speaks with a harsh tone when called upon in class. The teacher implements a token reinforcement system to target the behavior of concern. First, the teacher specifies the desired behavior that will earn a token reinforcer. Then the teacher and the student agree on backup reinforcers. Which of the following should the teacher do next? Describe the rules for the acquisitions and exchange of tokens. A middle school teacher is taking data on a student who exhibits repetitive behavior in class. What type of data should be collected on the student? Frequency recording. While conducting an antecedent behavior consequence chart, a teacher recorded the following observations. At 10:35, student A is singing loudly in class. Behavior. Student B walks up to student A and punches student A. Which of the following would be most appropriate consequence to record? Student A begins to cry. The sequence of behaviors related to language development in children has several stages. Which of the following stages follows the babbling stage, language development? Echolalia. A student with or without disabilities has reached the highest level of language development when the student uses different rules of language in different contexts. This level is called pragmatics. A student who is nonverbal and has an orthopedic impairment is ready for argumentative communication evaluation when the student has developed communicative intent. An 11-year-old student attends an inclusive 5th grade classroom. The student's expressive language skills and reading skills are significantly lower than those of classmates. The student refuses to read from appropriate grade level books and materials because they are too hard, or this stuff doesn't interest me. It's boring. When linguisticality sounds, strategy should be the student's teacher use. Language experience approach. Poor listening skills have frequently been identified as a receptive language deficit for each ESE student. Which of the following pairs of strategies would be most appropriate for a teacher to employ when communicating instruction? Using short and clear direction, pairing spoken messages with visual stimuli. When discussing the outcomes of argumentative and alternative communication systems, several questions must be considered to answer the question, does it work? Which of the following is considered the most important? Has the student increased communication ability? The most appropriate initial step for building vocabulary is having primary concrete experiences related to the new words. What is the term used to describe the smoothness with which speech units flow together? Fluency. Jack, a fourth grade student with learning disabilities, has difficulty creating complex sentences. The ESE teacher plays word association games with Jack and gives him oral practice in constructing sentences using verbs, prepositions, and adjectives. Jack is experiencing difficulty with syntax. Creating an atmosphere of ease and relaxation, allowing the students to complete their own sentences, maintaining eye contact, and providing opportunities for choral reading are interventions primarily used to improve fluency. Audrey, a student who cannot use her hands, is able to complete her assignments on a computer by using an eye-gazing system. A student is struggling to read and required content in the grade level science text. What stage of reading is the student unable to complete? Decoding. A student's spelling errors include legible for legible, photographic for photographic, and comparison for comparison. Which of the following instructional approaches would be most appropriate? Phonetic awareness. Which of the following is most likely to improve reading fluency for a student who reads accurately but slowly? Timed repeated reading. A student with a learning disability struggles with recalling facts and retaining information. The most appropriately meet the student's needs, the student should be provided with graphic organizers. With teacher guidance, a small group of students take turns writing known letters and familiar words while composing a message on a piece of chart paper. This activity best illustrates which of the following instructional approaches. Interactive writing. A teacher creates a study guide for a student with a learning disability who needs support for reading comprehension. By making the study guide available to all students, a teacher is providing differentiated instruction. Students receive instruction in filling out employment applications and comparing price for items they might purchase. This is an example of functional curriculum. A 12th grade student has been involved for 2 years in ESC community-based instruction and work experience training at a local dry cleaners. Upon completion of the school year, the student will continue to work at the dry cleaner with additional training as needed. This model is called supported employment. During an IEP meeting, the committee recommended that a 16-year-old student increases their vocational skills. The IEP team decides that the student needs to enhance their communication, punctuality, and self-advocacy skills. What type of career education would best meet the student's needs? Community-based instruction. As part of a job placement program, a high school student with an emotional disability will soon begin working after school at a local restaurant. Which of the following actions by the ESC teacher would be most effective in promoting the student's success on the job? Establishing communication with the restaurant manager to facilitate collaborative support of the student. A 17-year-old ESC student in 10th grade is in their IEP meeting. The student's grades and behavior are good. The student wants to know what area of personal development needs to be a priority before graduating from high school. Which of the following would be most important self-determination skill for the student to focus on for the next 2 years? Developing independent living skills. A teacher is working with students to help them identify their interests, strengths, preferences, needs, and possible resources. Which of the following skills are being taught? Self-determination. A goal for a student on a transition IEP states that the student will walk to and from off-campus site while following safety and traffic guidelines. Under which transaction service domain would this goal most appropriately fit? Community experience.